Good evening to the viewing public. Good morning to those that will hear this in its audio format. I am your host, Jason Miles, here for another episode of Pop Life, brought to you by the good people of This Is Revolution podcast. If you don't know, this is the show where we take a fun deep dive into more entertaining realms of popular culture, music, art, film, basically the stuff I dig. Yesterday was supposed to be a more serious show, but we did take a bit of a train to sitcom land. That was fun. But today, this very special Sunday episode, we're going to take a fun ride back to the 90s. And I think our guest today is one of the best conductors for that. This person is not just a historian of the era, they are also a fan. And that always makes the conversation better, in my opinion. Speaking of speaking, if you don't already know, I'll be back in San Francisco next month at the El Rio in the Mission District, speaking about Donald Trump. Ben Burgess and I will be doing a fun, intimate live podcast where we wrestle with the question, is Donald Trump the end of history? Wherever you are watching or listening to this, there is a link in the description for tickets. Like I said, it's going to be a small, intimate gathering. So get your tickets soon, as this show should sell out quickly. Also, we've had a busy week here on TIR. I did a special morning stream on Tuesday with music legend David Garfield. Please, if you haven't done that, check that out. That was a really dope conversation. I was trying to contain my fanboy as best I could. And then, like I said, yesterday, got a cool conversation with Professor Eileen Giselle, originally about her Jacobin article on class mobility. But like I said, we went down a rabbit hole of 80s and 90s sitcoms. She did send me a message after the show to remind me that she was right on the Growing Pains theme song. I got it confused with Family Ties for some reason. That is my racism kicking in. All white people don't look alike. Or sing alike. Or have the exact same sitcom. Quick reminder that TIR is listener-supported programming. If you enjoy what we do here, have the means, feel so inclined, become a patron for as little as $3 a month or $30 for the year. You can have access to champagne rooms past and present. Join us for our patron-only call-in shows, movie nights. We haven't had them in a while. Again, that's my bad. I haven't hit up Jeremy Salmon in a minute. We are due to watch part 2 of Nothing But a Good Time. Have access to the TIR Discord. And you make sure we stay on the air. Wherever you are watching or listening to the show, there is a link in the description to become a patron. We're definitely going to be going to the champagne room next week. So, with all that out of the way, let's talk about what brought you here. When Lollapalooza ruled the world, the rise and fall of the alternative counterculture. Ooh, that sounds like a fun dissertation to not read. In 1991, Jane's Addiction was calling it quits, and frontman Perry Farrell, a pop culture visionary with a penchant for pushing boundaries, wanted to give the band a farewell that transcended the usual rock tour. Instead of a routine send-off, he curated an eclectic lineup that brought together emerging underground acts and cultural icons, creating a space where punk, industrial, hip-hop, and alternative rock collided. The inaugural Lollapalooza tour in 1991 was a radical departure from the stadium-dominated rock scene of the time, featuring artists like Ice-T's incendiary hardcore band Body Count, goth legend Susie and the Banshees, one of my favorite groups, Susie and the Banshees, industrial disruptors 9 Inch Nails, and black alternative pioneers Living Color. Lollapalooza wasn't just a music festival, it was an alternative cultural statement. At a time when metal and hard rock ruled MTV in the charts, college radio was nurturing a growing underground movement, and MTV's late night programs like 120 Minutes amplified these voices, giving rise to what would soon be branded the alternative revolution. But Lollapalooza wasn't just about music. Farrell envisioned an interactive space where art installations, political activism, and fringe ideologies could coexist, creating a festival that challenged mainstream norms. It was a carnivalesque response to the corporate sheen of the 1980s music industry, a space where disaffected youth could engage with radical ideas from environmentalism to anti-corporate resistance. In many ways, Lollapalooza prefigured the now commodified spectacle of Coachella, where art and music intersect, but often with its subversive edge dulled by commercial interests. Yet, like the hair metal scene it helped bury, the alternative movement that fueled Lollapalooza was fleeting. By the late 1990s, the festival began courting mainstream acts like Metallica, alienating the indie purists who had once defined its ethos. Lollapalooza's original incarnation fizzled out in 1998, briefly returned in 2003. That's my only time seeing it, was in 2003, and then disappeared again in 2004 due to low ticket sales. By 2005, it had been rebranded as a corporate-sponsored destination festival in Chicago. Its once radical spirit now neatly packaged for mass consumption. Today, we'll explore the rise and fall of Lollapalooza and the music scene it propelled. We'll examine why so many of the artists who thrived in this era have either retreated back to the underground or vanished altogether, and what that tells us about the commodification of counterculture in the neoliberal era. Please welcome my guest, who wrote a really good book. She came on, was it last year? And spoke with me and Conan. And I think Varn joined us too. Please welcome Professor Katherine Rye Jewell.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for agreeing to do this. I know we kind of bounced around dates a little bit on when we were going to do this, but I'm stoked to have you. Did you get a chance to watch that mildly depressing documentary about Lollapalooza?
So I had an amazing comedy of errors. This is there was like a meta story with trying to get access to the documentary in terms of like the corporate structures that I was encountering and trying to get access to this documentary, because I kept getting signed out of all of my accounts and had to reset my Apple TV. It was kind of a disaster. But what I did is I went and started doing some primary source deep dives on Lollapalooza. And so I have brought some memories deep from the bowels of the internet, including the 1995 CMJ issue.
Oh, wow.
On Lollapalooza, to kind of give us a little bit of context. It's an interesting aesthetic journey. Let's just say there's also tips for how to do a road trip embedded within their guide to Lollapalooza.
How to do a road trip. Find your friends that love the Grateful Dead. A road trip. They'll tell you how to, do something strange for drugs.
Yes.
I watched the documentary because I've been trying to write this essay for a heavy metal compendium, and it's all about capitalist reproduction and the end of hair metal, and kind of challenging the notion that the genre really just petered out because of alternative. There's a lot of other factors. I do think alternative music plays a factor, and for me, a big reason why alternative music plays a factor is the early days of, let's just call it hair metal for all intents and purposes. Don't like the name. Okay, yeah, pop metal. Sorry, I don't know if you're a genre name snob like me. I just hate them. I hate them.
No, they all change all the time, anyways.
Yeah. And after, right, no one ever sat there and was like, "Oh, dude, we got to do here." Anyway, we're gonna be an alternative band. Like, if you said that, you sucked.
Yeah.
Like, don't trust those people. They are not cool. But that music originally was a lot more aggressive. And I think the bands that really made it, starting with Ozzy, it was kind of like, let's sand off the rough edges of your heavy metal soul. I don't know, of your whole heavy metal sound. Let's make this a lot more accessible. And with the success of that, then you get the Quiet Riots and the Motley Crues and all these other bands. And MTV, I think, is a major factor for all this. But what happens is that music really soon, probably by 85, gets real cut and paste. 86, definitely you get bands like Poison, which is just a really bad 3D copy of Motley Crue. And by 87, you have bands citing Poison as an influence. It's like, well, they just came out last year. How can they be influencing you? It's very visual. But in the college radio world, you don't have as much MTV support. There's only a small handful of bands that probably even have enough money to do a video. I think people don't really understand how expensive a cheap video was in the 80s. It was still probably a 6-figure ordeal. So there's something organic about college radio, and definitely when it gets a little more aggressive, the people that liked a more aggressive side, the shout at the devil people, they're like, well, this stuff is getting kind of candy, but man, there is something brewing over here.
Pay no attention to the cod pieces that they're
all well, the thing about that is, I don't know if you would agree. Would you agree that they're also taking a little bit of that hardcore scene that's really popular? I'm talking about like early 80s.
Yeah.
There's a lot of spikes in that world as well.
Yeah. Yeah, they're taking sort of the early, like the Judas Priest aesthetic.
Yeah.
With the kind of like the BDSM sort of overtones and like kind of spinning them out to their kind of nonsensical conclusions.
Well, because this is how I feel, and I don't know if you feel the same way. If you were in a non-metal band, it really wasn't about the show.
Yes.
It was about the gig. And the metal guys were always about the show because they had to be adjacent to fame, which is why scenes never really blew up out of their hometowns. They all went to Los Angeles because that's where you go get famous. Whereas this music really stayed, like Athens, for example, is going to tell you that Athens is the epicenter for music stardom. But there's the B-52s, there's REM. Is Pylon from
Pylon,
Athens?
Yeah, there's another one. Yeah, the show, I mean, the only like truly crossover like metal band that is kind of in the indie circuit that I can think of is Gwar. Like real like bona fide punk roots, but that are like but they're not hair band.
No. No. They're a hardcore band that understood the show, right?
Yeah.
Kiss. They're maybe the Kiss of hardcore. Someone says it's B-52 from the 90s. No, that 79, I think, is that first record.
Very early. Yeah, they predate REM by like 3 years, and they're very much like instrumental in kind of bringing together that like weirdness of the Athens scene, which is very much like you can't talk about Athens without putting it in the South and the university system in Georgia and the kind of the Sunbeltification of the South is very much like what the B-52s and REM are growing out of. Like you wouldn't listen to them and think like, oh, this is a Southern band.
Not at all.
But they're part of this kind of like underground kind of bohemian culture that is always been in the South, but kind of spinning out in new ways in the 80s and this, playing with kind of pop tropes, pop images as they were circulating in the late 70s.
Is that kind of a thing that maybe hamstrings that movement for a while? Is it's the bohemian bourgeois nature of the music and it being so arty.
Mhm.
Um, even the New York sound, because I really think this is just my opinion. I don't know if you feel the same way. By the time you hit Nirvana, they've perfectly done the alternative thing. They can be played on college radio, but they can also be played in the hinterlands of the suburbs.
Mhm.
They're aggressive enough where they can cross over.
Yeah.
Do you think that some there's a little bit of pretension that keeps this music a little bit underground?
Yes. So the class dimensions of this, I think, are really important because so you have punk in the mid 70s, which is very much working class youth, white youth in particular, right? The
Mhm.
Ramones, Queens, outer boroughs, seeing the decline of the industrial economy, and there's this like sense of no future. And that is like deeply embedded in the punk aesthetic. Same in the UK, right? The mining economy is collapsing, urban spaces are getting underfunded, and punk kind of comes out of that. But then you get the kind of art rock new wave spin-off of the post-punk by the late 70s. So Talking Heads and Joy Division, which becomes New Order. And that is very much the like college set that is listening to new wave. And so there's this kind of class bifurcation in the underground. And new wave gets picked up on a lot of commercial radio stations.
Yes,
The
it
music
does.
industry is like, "Ooh, there might be some money here. These are the kind of consumers that we want." Whereas hair metal, I think, remains very or goes more pop, but it remains working class as
Mhm.
metal does, kind of with those ties. And so Nirvana is able to kind of exist in both of those milieu, I guess, to use a college educated word. Uh,
Which is to me really interesting when we think about this moment in time, because I don't think people really understand these strict class lines in which a lot of this music is existing. I'm not gonna lie and say that I was a huge fan of all the stuff that came out. I to this day don't understand REM. It's not for me. Um, but how did college radio become incubators for alternative and underground music, in your opinion?
Yeah, so college radio is one of these places that also kind of exists between, because obviously they're at colleges,
Mhm.
but these stations grow out of this desire by institutions in the 60s and 70s to prove their public value, their public service, and that they exist on the public airwaves. They want to serve communities that surround institutions. It starts out with very overtly kind of public service oriented programming, like NYU's radio station in the 1960s had programming by the Urban League, for example.
Mhm.
And in the 70s, you would get lots of stuff of like, here's how to deal with inflation. And, here is now a religious service that's going to serve, the Polish American residents in, around the Bronx, coming out of Fordham or something like that. So it's this very clear desire to serve people who are not in the institution, even as it is sort of this thing done by mostly college students and community DJs. By the early 80s, though, there is these growing scenes that are really not looking to college radio. Ian Mackay and Discord Records they're not looking at college radios like there's our vehicle to superstardom and success. It just is that a lot of those college DJs want to or are sort of, going to local shows. They're hearing this stuff. They want to play it on their radio shows. And so there starts to be this connection. And you get people like Bruce Pavitt at Sub Pop and near Seattle and Olympia, who start to kind of cross network those scenes, that
Mhm.
they're very consciously trying to say like, I'm in this scene, but I want to hear what's going on in Portland and in Chicago and in
Mhm.
DC. And here I'm going to make a mixtape that like shows all of these different scenes and, Charlottesville and wherever. And so college radio is the institution that starts to kind of make those connections between all of these little points of light of what we would think of now as sort of the hardcore indie rock scenes of the early 1980s is when this starts to cohere. And so they start to diverge from what's going on in the mainstream industry. I mean, really until the late 1970s, college radio and early 80s, most college radio is very major label. There aren't really a lot of small independent labels to play. Hip hop gets tiny little footholds here and there at certain stations. Maybe mixtapes are getting played on air.
I do want to say that I'm glad you mentioned that because, and I just going to real brief because you're on a roll and I feel like a douche for doing this, so I apologize. College radio for me played a massive role in my understanding of hip hop because I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, where I believe you write about it in your book, where we actually have stations that played local artists. So for us growing up, if you were played on the college radio station, it was better than being played on like KMEL, which was a mainstream station where I was from. A, because hip hop didn't get played that much in the early 90s. There's still black stations that won't play it. And B, by the time hip hop is being played on the radio, it's a certain style of music that I wasn't the biggest fan of. So college radio, again, I was just, for me, I would say all of California, because Southern California had some really important stations as well. It really was a way to get your music out to everybody in the area.
Yeah, I mean, there's stories of like Common, when he was still Common Sense, like sitting out in front of the radio, the University of Chicago's radio station, and like 1986, 87, sometime that time frame. Like, I got a demo. Like, you want to hear my stuff? And because that was a way by then to get your stuff out there. But all right, I'm gonna do some name dropping because I have recently, I don't have it with me. Otherwise, I would like open it up and show you because I'm so proud of this. I recently met Harry Allen from Public Enemy.
Oh, wow.
And, I had him sign my book because I was like, you and WBAU and Adelphi was so important, not just in getting hip hop onto radio, but, the taking it from its original neighborhoods and bringing it up to the suburbs in Long Island. And Run DMC was hanging out at the station with them, and Public Enemy forms really quite literally at the station. And that what they were able to do, and this is like 81, 82, 83 that they're doing this. And Bill Stepney goes from running the WBAU radio station to doing the first national hip hop chart in 1983 at CMJ. He compiles the beatbox chart, which is the first time. So they're doing what Bruce Pavitt is doing for indie rock at the same time. And so you kind of can't tell the story of college radio. And I think the hip hop story gets taken out of the indie rock story because of the way that alternative gets corporatized, particularly like REM is college rock, and it's going to be that vein of gold that they're going to trace. Whereas hip hop is very instrumental in shaping college radio.
Yes.
But it gets kind of pushed to the side, and it's got kind of a different sort of corporate story. And I think because a lot of the commercial politics, I guess, within hip hop.
Are we still in a racialized moment though with music because I talked about this with David Garfield the other day, that a lot of, again, I hate the term yacht rock, so let's just call it adult contemporary, right?
Yep.
But a lot of adult contemporary for me was black people. Patrice Rushen, Luther Vandross, Jeffrey Osborne. Even though these guys, the same people, are playing on all these records, they exist in very different lanes. They didn't get as much push on a mainstream level. It just existed on black radio, which is what my black parents listened to all the black time. But do you feel the same could be said for hip hop in that sense, where all this stuff is working together And Perry Farrell is someone that definitely listens to college radio. So
Mhm.
his festival, in my opinion, really is what you can listen to on air, but in the mainstream lens, this is this crazy thing.
Mhm. Yeah, I think there's this really interesting generational transition happening in the 80s that tracks in weird ways onto these different genres. So I was just talking to another historian friend of mine, Austin McCoy, who you should absolutely meet. He's writing a book on De La Soul.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Look
Yeah.
that shit up. Yeah.
And he's an amazing historian. He's a labor historian, right? So
Oh.
he's very cognizant of all of the class politics of this. And we're basically the same age, and our parents are the same age. And we just recorded a podcast episode together, kind of comparing the music that we were exposed to through our parents, kind of versus what we were listening to. And we were sort of mixing in sort of like the mixtape format into the discussion, less kind of the radio stuff. But so his parents had like Cameo and um like all of the Jackson siblings
Mhm.
records. And
Yeah.
I went and like, speaking of cod pieces, so, so for this episode I went and like listened to Cameo. I had never listened to Cameo. I'd heard Sade, which was like the other tape that his parents had. And like I put on a Cameo video, and this guy's like dancing around in like a red
Mhm.
patent leather codpiece.
Mhm.
Like it is very like
Mhm.
80s glam hair metal aesthetic.
Mhm. Pointy
But it's
guitars. Yeah.
but it's like R&B, like pop,
Mhm.
clearly for Black audiences, who are not probably teenagers. Like it was more of that adult contemporary
Yeah.
listener, and then like young Austin was like, oh, like I forget which Jackson sibling it
Rebe.
was.
Rebe
Had
Jackson. Centipede.
Yeah.
Centipede. Dun, 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 dun. Jermaine Jackson. Jermaine Jackson is
Jermaine
always like,
Jackson, and he's like, yeah, there was like this record cover that he had, which was like he was saying he had like all this black leather on. And he looked like scary. He was like outside of a house. It was like
this Jermaine Jackson. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
he's like that record album like really scared the crap out of me. But so fast forward to the mid 90s, he's trying to get a hold of like gangster rap, and his parents are not listening to that at all.
Yeah.
Whereas like my dad like still kind of was listening, like he would listen to REM, like he would listen to this stuff that was kind of coming out of these underground. So there's these kind of interesting breaks. So Perry Farrell is listening to more like what my dad is listening to, but also kind of getting these shades of the kind of hip hop that was appearing on college radio.
Mhm.
But I think the commercialization of hip hop is very different. It follows a different path than what's happening in indie rock. The independent label thing is it has kind of a different trajectory. Like there are independents at work, but it doesn't kind of define
No, there is
the genre, and it's the
there
way that it
is
does with rock.
Dude, would you say this? There's no punk rock ethos in hip hop. The independent label thing is just a means to an end, so you get bought out by a major. Whereas I don't necessarily know if that's SST's, main goal to get bought out by a major. Maybe it's to become a major, but
Mhm.
it is not to get bought out by a major, because you can lose fans, because at that point you've sold out. And I don't think
Yeah.
hip hop has a sellout, especially now with all this stuff coming out about all these dudes lying about their backstories. I have to send you this clip of this young kid. He's rapping about he's like, I got all these women and I got all these cars, and then they're interviewing him and they're like, so do you really have all these? He's like, no, I don't. I have one girlfriend and I can't drive. I don't have a license. And he's like, I'm in France spinning bands. And a band is $1,000, right? It's the bills wrapped in a band. He's like, bands and France. And they're like, have you been? He goes, I've never left the United States. I've never been anywhere. And he's just being very honest. Like, you would get beat up, 30 years ago. So yeah, hip hop has always been, in my opinion, about braggadocio, and has no problem selling out, brags about it selling out. Whereas I think punk, you can't brag about it. And that's where that, for me, the real big disconnect is for hair metal. So while Metallica is selling a ton of records, they're still doing it in jeans and t-shirts, and you don't see them on the bus. You don't see their plane. So they did it the right way. Motley Crue, as soon as they'll fake it. Look, we showed up in a limo. Look at these girls. There's titties everywhere. Titties. Hip hop has a little of that, but there's a projection, I feel. I don't know if you feel the same way about groups like Public Enemy. And this is where that class thing really comes into play for me for hip hop and what you're talking about. In the early 80s, adult contemporary music there's still a moment where people are making music for adults, like you said about Cameo. The music is not for kids. A lot of it deals with like complex relationships, the divorce, loss of parents, having children. It was made for the growing boomer population, and this is where this moment where MTV is going to market to a younger audience that is able to pay for music, and it becomes profitable. So now we're going to shift our focus to these younger people, because now the medium in which we take music in is very visual. So the people that are writing about hip hop early on are writing about it as this revolutionary force. It's the real voice of the Black community. So Public Enemy, and I have Public Enemy shirts. I'm a fan, Brace. Oh, it's like I'm not. But we got to admit they were doing some like interpretive dance on stage with fake guns. Like, you can't deny that. And that's going to be looked at as like, this is the most important thing. I thought Public Enemy is going to start a riot. Like, no song starting a riot.
No, they're nice college boys. Like,
I mean, Flavor Flav had a reality show for multiple seasons.
Try and find love, but so did Bret Michaels. The same show.
Exact same shit. Copy and paste.
Like, it's the same show. I watch both of them religiously because they're both amazing. but yeah. But like, if you think about like, so there's DIY with original punk. And that again is because people didn't have any money. It was the 70s. Everything sucked. And so like, yeah, you had to hold your clothes together with safety pins. It becomes an aesthetic, right? In the 1980s. But if you look at, so for one thing, hip hop is, it's a party music. It's not meant to be recorded until Sugar Hill Gang, and they get it down to 15 minutes, put it on a record.
Yeah, that's long.
So there's like, it's a little later of like a thing. So like yeah, you could have a radio show. So Curtis Blow actually had a radio show at a college radio station. I forget which college, maybe a community college in New York, somewhere in the Bronx or something. In like 79. So like hip hop, you could have a radio show because you could fill up a block of time. But the idea of like taking that and putting it on media that you're then going to sell, instead there's like a black market of like, okay, I'm going to go play a set at this party, I'm going to record it, and then I'm going to sell those tapes. That's kind of where the commercialization of hip hop takes off, is through a very different mechanism than in indie rock, which is about getting signed onto an indie label, which then, again, like Ian MacKay's not necessarily starting Discord with this in mind, but college radio becomes the engine of marketing for them. Like, it is kind of their game, whereas hip hop kind of has these other circulating networks that are going on. Not that indie rock doesn't have those, but college radio becomes this sort of centralized institution in large part because, there's a lot of white college students who are interested in that music. And if you look at hip hop and where it's getting played, so that show that Common was sitting out in front of at WHPK, that's a white DJ in Chicago. There's another one Ken Wissaker is the name of one of the DJs, who's now like the editor of Duke University Press, not the editor, the director of the
Oh,
entire,
wow. Okay.
so he had like the first hip hop radio show in Chicago, probably in like 1984. And same in Boston. Lekko Slema was on MIT's radio station, and it was a white college student. So it was, it was kind of college radio sort of driven by, whoever was there. And like, yeah, there were Black students, but there's all these fights that happen in, because a lot of the college students who are going to predominantly white institutions, they weren't necessarily like going to hip hop shows, right? They were not like those tapes were like circulating, like basically like, a hustler, a drug dealer, be like, I have like this guy played my party and like I'm selling this tape and like I can help him make money. Like it was not the scene that a lot of those students were hanging out in necessarily. There were some, or there was at least some cachet that they were like picking up on. Whereas I think like, so the accessibility was different between college radio. But at the same time, the DJs that were there, the students that were there were really influential. And hip hop was, that there was this sensibility, there's a lot of like do-gooder mentality, I guess, among, they're like, we want to play the Black music, like, and like, it was genuine. They really did. But it would be like, okay, like we have a rotation of 30 albums coming in this week, and we got 2 hip hop albums, and they are Public Enemy and Run DMC. That's it.
There's these 2 Def Jam records.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, do you think that, and I don't want to waste too much time with hip hop here. I shouldn't say waste too much time. I don't want to spend too much time with hip hop here, because the show isn't about that. And now, like, all 24 white people that were watching are mad. They're like, we knew we shouldn't have trusted this Black guy. This is bait and switch. LL Cool J isn't getting the same kind of spins, because I think his music is, for better or for worse, for the street, as they say. And there's something that, again, I think you can project politically onto Run DMC, because I feel that first Run DMC record in 1984, the self-titled record, is probably the first serious hip-hop album. There's a few hip-hop albums in the early 80s. There's not that many. To your point,
it's still a party aesthetic.
Yeah.
Right? Even if you look at, Melly Mel and, or The Message, right? Which is very clearly like message rap, but it's still got this like, my God, my brain is not functioning. I didn't have enough coffee.
Danceability.
Yeah, it's, and like if you look at Melly Mel in the video, right? Like the style is still very like Curtis Blow party music, or even Curtis Blow, right? It's like The Breaks. It's a song about, being on the outs, but it's like, woo, let's dance to that, right?
Yeah.
It's not, it hasn't fully made that transition into, whereas Run DMC, they're very consciously like, we're going to have a look, and we're going to put on the black leather jacket and the Adidas, and we're going to look street.
Yeah.
In a very conscious way.
Yeah.
Which is, very commercially savvy.
You're selling Black life. You're selling Black life to people that aren't next to it. And even though you're rapping about going to college, it doesn't matter, because this is gangster life. I go back, if you don't believe anything Catherine and I are saying, there are multiple YouTube channels that you can go back and watch literal interviews with people talking about Run DMC being the scourge of the community in the 80s because they didn't put laces in their shoes. I want you to think about that for a second, right? Like Run DMC, in 2025, there's no one looking at like Run DMC is gangster rap. Any rap was gangster rap. Because it was this sound from the street that people were like, this is the true sound of an urban uprising. Now, how much do academics play in this at this moment, or does it take the 90s for a younger cohort of or maybe even the 2000s of academia to come up and be like, this is the voice of Black America?
Yeah, it takes a while for anybody in the academy to like take this seriously as something. I have like literally over my shoulder is Trisha Rose's Hip Hop Wars book,
Okay.
So next to the Jay Dilla book, but you know,
You're well-rounded. Okay.
yeah. But I mean, so by the time I got to college radio in the late 90s, so maybe I mentioned this the last time, it's in the book. I went to college with Egon, who went to Stone's Throw Records after he graduated in 2000. Ethan Alapat. And so like he brought like Madlib to our station. Like I met Madlib in college. And it like Chemist and all these
All the
kind
LA
of,
guys.
yeah, like he was like already like connected with that, but like so that was sort of the direction of, you know, the very like hip hop underground. We played a lot of Wu-Tang. Like it was, you know, anything that was sort of seen as underground hip hop was what was mostly going to be found in somebody just wrote, was he a cool guy in college? He was ridiculous. Like we lived in the same dorm. He was sort of like we lived in the same dorm, and he would like go in and out with like gigantic like rolly carts of records, and we're all like, oh, there goes Egon. like like he's too cool for us to hang out with him. He's probably like going to like cut a record somewhere. And he like ran the radio station. He was really good. He was really good at it. He had a vision, and you know, but it was very clear that he, you know, we were all just like making fart jokes and like in the lobby, and Egon's like, I'm sorry, I have like things to do. Like it was different mentalities about what we were doing with that. But because I think, you know, he had a kind of a cultural project that he wanted to engage in. You know, and then he goes on Jay Dilla, like he was like the creative director of Jay Dilla's estate or something, right? So like that's what he was doing. But I always got like there was still very much a division, I guess. So Egon, you know, he was interested in indie rock, he knew indie rock, but his thing was hip hop, and that was very rare that you would have somebody at a station that was really promoting hip hop as like the thing that this college radio station was going to do. You know, you'd have shows because we had the block schedule, and so it'd be around. You know, so I'm trying to very artfully work this back to Lollapalooza, and the way that someone like Perry Farrell was incorporating hip hop into this mix, because if you look at like the whole program for these Lollapaloozas, it looks like how college radio incorporated hip hop, of like, here's all the big names in indie rock. Oh, we got Ice Cube too.
Well, they had a song, Perry Farrell and Ice-T, the first Lollapalooza, do this like a racial duet together, because I think this is still, this is before the riots. The first one is before the LA riots, but there's a tension in Los Angeles. Farrell is from Los Angeles, as is Ice-T. I'm sure those guys both understood these tensions that were happening, that were mounting racially, because the beating, I think, had happened by the time it happens, but the trial had not happened. But Latasha Harlins definitely got shot around that time. So I think we might look back at that and be like, oh, look at this love fest at the end of Lollapalooza. But if you go back in your Wayback Machine and think about how tense things were in 1991, you know, Arizona still won't make MLK's birthday a holiday. Public Enemy had to do a whole song, by the time I get to Arizona.
But
so,
like,
yeah, go ahead.
But like I'm looking at the CMJ guide to Lollapalooza of summer of 1995. You know, so the shift is on by that point. And so the featured artists that they're drawing out are Beck, and they're going like, oh, and like John Spencer Blues Explosion like might show up, like a little like, oh, like there's some real like indie rock next to the big headliner who's on MTV. We got Mighty Mighty Bosstones, Jesus Lizard, Sinead O'Connor, Pavement, Hole, Cypress Hill, Sonic Youth.
And what year was this? 93?
This is 95.
Ah, the year I graduated high school. Shout out 95.
Yes. You know, and then they give a little selected discography for each of the bands, and then like songs to yell for. It's like giving you like, here's how to have some cred. but I mean, so this is what's really funny. So they've got songs likely to be on the writer of like, okay, and then the songs to yell for. You know, so like the songs to yell for Beck are MTV Makes Me Want to Smoke Crack.
That's an awesome title.
Which, like, yeah, I didn't remember that. And so it's sort of like telling you
How to have fun. A
yeah,
fun guide.
yeah, it's like you're behind the scenes, like here, like so Pavement, they would want to have Civil War history books in their backstage thing. I don't know if that's like a Charlottesville thing. And then like your songs to yell out for circa 1762 and West S. Reason through Fight Through the Mosh Pit is also listed for each one of them, like to get it to the front, you know, so sort of like why this band matters. So Pavement is brilliant songs, second drummer Bob, always a sight to see, Stephen Malkmus, Indie Dreamboat.
Wow. Indie Dreamboat. Let's market this just like mainstream music, but different because it's different.
Right. No, we really are different.
Is this when, but would you say 95 is kind of when this thing loses its way? Or because the first year you do have, I think everybody's on a major label. I don't think there's any indie label bands on the first tour because it's Jane's, Susie, Ice-T with Body Count was on like Warner, I think.
Mm-hmm.
9 Inch Nails was on a major. Who else was on that first show? There's only like 8 bands.
Yeah. I mean, they had to be enough of a draw that you could get a crowd. You know, John Spencer Blues Explosion, as much as I love them, like they're not going to fill up.
No, I believe it was 95. Because I don't know if you're friends with the people from Poster Children, but I know that one of the guys is a professor at Illinois State, and Conan is a good friends with those guys, and they were part of that either 95 or 96 year. That was really a downturn for them ticket sales wise, and there's all these theories of why, and some people say, oh, it was mainstream bands. But I think it does have something to do with the fact that none of these people were playing. Like you can't. I had friends that played the last year of Warped Tour before it went on its however long hiatus.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at the 94 CMJ. Sorry, I'm doing like primary source research as I'm sitting here, which is not a productive use of my time or anybody else's probably. It's like, you know, it's a very important thing, but like when didn't they start releasing compilations at a certain point too? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Like when when that was happening, like so it becomes like a commercial
Warped Tour. Sorry, I lost you for a second. Yeah, Warped Tour kind of right away. I would say at the end of the 90s, beginning of the 2000s, they started releasing those compilations in the Hot Topics when those things were kind of lockstep, right? Bands and Hot Topic and Warped Tour and all this stuff was working together. But by the end, they were saying that there's like a few thousand kids there. There were like empty, you know, festivals become a thing where it's just about, you know, I don't know if you've ever been to a Coachella, but it really is just about corporate sponsorship because that's who's paying a lot of the bill. And when we're talking about all these back in the day festivals, this is still an era of cash only. Like bringing your credit card to a festival is a relatively new phenomenon. So this is still the era of, you know, the cats are going there with like maybe $1,000, $500 or something in cash because you got to eat. But Lala is only one day, so we're not even in the multiple day festival thing. We're not in the Woodstock throwback. And because this is why, for me, as someone that worked in music festivals so close to the planning process, I was so interested about how this thing got done, because you're talking about bands that none of them were playing large rooms. And a large room is like an auditorium that holds about 8 to 10,000 people. And I've even seen Lenny Kravitz have a half filled room. He played the Bill Graham when I was still working in that world, and it was less than half fill. And that's 2 hours of hits. Every song is, I know that. So being able to fill 8,500 seat rooms is a big deal. And when you see music festivals today, generally the top billed bands, all the people with the big thick lettering, those are all people that can play those size rooms, if not bigger, on their own. And everybody else is just along for the ride to give some sort of validity to the festival.
Mm-hmm.
But you're really just there to sell space for sponsorships. Every stage is sponsored, every room is sponsored, every experience is sponsored. It's very interactive now. And Lollapalooza is doing this stuff before smartphone. So it really was about what Perry Farrell wanted to do with conversations,
Mm-hmm.
which I find interesting. I don't know how you felt about that aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, just the information desert aspect of all of this is so easy to forget. You know, I think we remember very well the music scarcity moments
Mhm.
of all of this and why we were also angry that CDs cost $25, you know, in
Yes.
1996. That because that, you know, out of most of our reach. Um, but just like how do you get to know where this band from another scene like is playing? Like there's no web page
Mm-mm.
you can go look up. Like, so how are you gonna, you know, actually see? Like, so you might hear them on your college radio station, or somebody will give you a mixtape, and you find out about this new band, or maybe they'll get like a featured spot on MTV with a video. But then, like, okay, like, how do you actually figure out where everybody's playing? Like, you have to then go get physical media to find this out. And like, I'm looking at these magazines, you know, and they've got like the whole like, here's your root book in Polestar for summer 1993, and like where, you know, everyone from like Leo Kottke to Matthew Sweet is playing with Leonard Skinnard, and then Lollapalooza, and then the names that they feature in this is Primus, Alice in Chains, Dinosaur Jr., Fishbone, Arrested Development, Front 242, Tool,
Mhm.
and Rage Against the Machine.
Wow.
So, you know, I mean, it's interesting, like Dinosaur Jr., you know, they have hits at this point. But you know, they were certainly, so I was 1993, I'm a freshman going into my freshman year in high school. I know who Arrested Development is.
Mhm.
I
Massive.
know who Alice in Chains is.
Massive.
I have no idea. I maybe at this point know who Rage is, but like I don't know who the rest of these people are. You know, because I don't know who they are. So what would get me to go to a Lollapalooza as a teenager would be one of those big bands, and then I might discover something new. So, you know, it's still very much mirroring those chains of information that college radio and zines were trying to fulfill, that the festival itself was a vehicle of discovery, I guess is the
Yes.
statement I'm
No,
trying to
no,
make
I
here.
agree with you whole. I know people that were like, I would go, or they would go, because it wasn't me, to Warp Tour, and that's where they get their school clothes. You know, oh, that band is cool, I'm gonna go buy their shirt. Oh, that band is cool, I'm gonna go buy their shirt. So I see Lollapalooza kind of in that same light where I'm gonna go discover the new music at the thing,
Hmm.
which I do think becomes a model for other festivals to try to copy, but it's just not profitable.
Yeah. I mean, I remember in high school, the Warped tour was what
Mhm.
everybody wanted to do. That was seen as very cool. Lollapalooza was seen as being very sold out.
Mhm.
Um, you know, this is my perspective from, you know, Vermont. So maybe there's a Warped tour, maybe there's a regionalism of this. Usually we're late to the game there. Usually it was like we were like 8 years behind everybody else. But you know, and we had the fish thing too. So there was Burning Man. What's the bread and puppets thing in Vermont? Always happened. Did you ever this one where they like have the puppets and
No.
it
There's a music venue in Vermont that, oh God, it's got one word name in Burlington. Very famous.
uh
The dude from Fish owns it, I think.
um
So the,
yes. I say I'm from Southern Vermont.
okay.
Bread, oh my God, the puppets in Vermont. Oh my,
I
it was
remember
like a hippies thing. Oh my God, I can't believe it.
Vermont is like hippie capital of the world, but there's this one venue. I cannot think of the name of it, and it's killing me. But they had they still, I think they still are open. I believe they still have a Metal Monday, and I got to play there a couple times, and it was so much fun.
Yes. Okay, here it is. It was Glover, Vermont. Bread and Puppet Theater. Sorry, this is me going down a rabbit hole. Often simply known as Bread and Puppet, is a politically radical puppet theater active since the 1960s, based in Glover, Vermont.
That is the most great society. Give them puppets. Stop the protesting ass project I've ever heard in my life.
This is Wikipedia. The name Bread and
That's
Puppet.
better than just write a poem about your landlord. Do a puppet show. We're gonna show them with puppets.
But they're big puppets. They're these like large, like on sticks. Yeah, it's still going. Like, so it says, bread and puppets derived from the theater's practice of sharing its own fresh bread, served for free with aioli, with the audience of each performance to create community. And from its central principle, art should be the basic as bread to life. This is what I grew up in. And I remember it was like the big, like, are you going to go to Bread and Puppet this summer? And I was like, no, or whatever it was. Yeah, maybe it was a fall thing. I don't really remember. But it was like a big deal. But it was very much a local, like, hippie cultural event that I always sort of equated with things like Lollapalooza and the Warped Tour. It was like the same kind of people were going, countercultural, broadly speaking. Yeah. The kids of the hippies would like want to go to Warped Tour.
Or because it was going to be the countercultural event. There was skateboarding there, but it's sponsored by,
yes,
Code Red fucking Mountain Dew, and that's what it's all about. And that's when you see how everything breaks down financially. You're like, this stuff can't happen without a series of corporate sponsorship, and it's every corporation you think would be horrible for young people. Alcohol, tobacco, soda companies, like that's who's all just pouring money into these things. But it is what it is.
Yeah.
Do you think that Lollapalooza challenges corporate music models of the 80s?
No, I think it was the corporate music model.
Woo! Sorry. Shots fired.
We're coming for you, nigga.
Damn.
Sorry.
Damn. Catherine Rye, Jewel. Mom in the attic is mad.
Yeah, it was. It was because by 91, the corporate music industry already, I would say, because remember, you have the modern rock Billboard chart by 89, really 88, 89. I always forget which year it is. Like, the music industry is already shifting its structures to create this thing called alternative. Alternative, it existed before. It was a word, but in the 70s, when college radio called itself alternative, there's absolutely no genre meaning to that whatsoever. It was alternative because it was not what was played on commercial radio. Now, that might mean we're playing like the second cut off of the Styx album. One, right? It's still major label music. The deep cuts, the B-sides.
This isn't some Mr. Roboto shit over here, brother.
I mean, they'd play some craft work. They'd be like, we're cool too. And then you would have like the jazz show and any black music like shoved late at night, where, because that's
where it belongs. Is that what you're going to say?
Specialty music. Or the beginnings of like world music. Like that's also kind of like a corporatized, thing.
How do you feel? Can I ask you this question? Because I think you're you have firing shots, as they say. There's another word that comes out around this time that I hate, which is indie. I thought indie was you are on an independent label.
Right.
But it's a genre of music, apparently.
Okay. So this is complicated because indie, it has a little more teeth in that, in the name itself. So let's take its predecessor, which is progressive.
Ooh, okay.
Right. So in the 70s, there's a word that like means many different things. It means progressive rock, like we're like King Crimson,
Mhm.
or prog rock, or it's progressive music meant new wave, or it meant progressive radio, where we are starting to like sort of play with other genres that it was, or it meant progressive radio, like Pacifica, like politically progressive, all these different names. CMJ, College Music Journal, starts out as Progressive Music Journal or something like that. Like progressive is in the title because it was like anything that's sort of associated with college radio. So indie is has a little bit more teeth to it because it's sort of like naming the like, oh, we're doing business differently. Like this is a different kind of setup, market setup. Indie is not doing business, literally business, in the same way that the corporate major label industry is.
Mhm.
But like progressive, right, it sort of picks up and gets narrowed into a very specific genre. I don't think that kind of aesthetic narrowing of indie really happens until the early 2000s, with, like the new, like the revamped New York scene. Like that kind of becomes like the new indie, think like Death Cab for Cutie.
Yeah.
And that sort of like soft voiced, I think of like
Or the
Iggy Pop,
Strokes.
Iggy Pop kind of criticizes like dickless rock or something. I think is what
Yeah.
he called it.
Damn. Well, I mean, tell me how you really feel, Iggy.
I think it was fair. Yeah, I forget exactly what I'm pretty sure that was the term that he used. But there was this sense that like indie was more experimental aesthetically
Mhm.
because it was different. We have college rock was sort of like a thing around REM. It was anything coming out of college radio. But I think a lot of the narrowing processes was, college rock is a way to say not hip hop. It's a way to kind of code like this is for white audiences. Um, and I think indie kind of is doing similar work. Um, but it has more teeth because it does have this at least vision of doing business differently attached to it. Um, but even if you sort of look at those business models, they're always squishy. So you might be like an IRS records, but you still have
Mhm.
distribution through a major.
Yep.
And you're charging fees to records, to college radio stations. In 1983 they would charge college radio stations $25 a year for record service, which is what the majors were doing. But that was because they wanted to be like a major. They thought that was the way that you had credibility within the industry, was if you were charging these fees. So there's sort of like this kind of aspirationalness to them. Then you have kind of like the true indies, like the Discords and these small startups, which have zero money for, they have zero money for promotions. They like don't have it's like a guy with like a mailbox and like some envelopes, and like that's as good as you're gonna get. So they would have maybe then also independent distribution, because I think, and I think the indie is decoupled from the business model aspects of this in the early 2000s, because that's also when you get the internet. And that's going to make doing business much easier in a way. Or you can circulate MP3s now, much lower cost. Like, remember, you could go onto Sub Pop and like download like the MP3 of the month or something,
Mhm.
or get all of like the latest sounds, and you could try them out and then see if you want to buy the record. So it's really not until we kind of decouple it from, how do we actually get the physical media into the hands of the people that want to hear it? How do we get them to know about the bands and that these exist? That's college radio. That's like the promotional. And now we've got to like get the records into their hands. That was sort of, so indie, I think, was still in the 90s, still very much attached to, we're going to get the physical media into the hands of the listener in these different ways, more authentic, whatever, DIY, maybe it's tapes, maybe it's CDs, maybe, whatever. I think that it just becomes an aesthetic as you move to new ways of distributing this music and getting it out there. But Lollapalooza is a sign that the corporate music industry sees a pathway. They see a promotion. They see this thing as being, they are already starting to shape things like alternative commercial rock radio. Deregulation of media is already happening. I think we have a tendency to see like, oh, 1996 happens, Telecommunications Act happens, and everything goes to shit. But it was all so in the works from 1983 on. It's just that there needed to be kind of a critical mass of material there to kind of justify a rotation that's linked to a specific demographic, a marketing demographic that they felt that they could sell to. And it's really not until the early 90s that there's enough of that demographic there that sort of buying into a particular aesthetic that they can sell stuff that way. I mean, remember all like the Gen X crap, like the Gen X marketing to like the loser generation, reality
slackers. We were
slackers.
slackers.
Yes. But then you got like the Reality Bites version of it by 94.
Yeah.
Right. That's the movie industry. And like,
Dude,
yes, like there's
you're dropping bombs right now. I just
Sorry.
want you to know that. No, I'm loving everything you're saying. I'd give you a hug if I was in your hood.
I mean, I loved Reality Bites. Like Ethan Hawke, I was deeply, deeply in love with him when that movie came out. And there was, right, and it's not that this is just like corporate sellout. It lacks integrity, right? These are still artists. Artists need to make a living, right? And so I think that's, so I'm not saying like everything's sold out 1983 and everything sucked from then on. That's not what I'm saying. I think bands deserve to earn a living on their art. And I think, the real sellout is the corporate vultures that kind of come in and take these artists and push them in directions that they don't necessarily want to go. Right. That was Steve Albini's critique and the sort of parasitic nature of that, co-optation of the art.
Yeah, I definitely have my critiques of Steve Albini, and I wish I could have met him to be like, I think that's bullshit.
But he says it with such panache.
He does. He says it with such confidence and arrogance. I met him one time, and he was actually very nice.
Apparently, he was lovely. I think he mellowed a lot too.
He also apparently was like a drug-free guy, so I think we probably would have gotten along and just butted heads. I butt heads with Conan all the time, so just whenever I'm around like a guy that loves college radio and is white, I'm just like, oh God, we're gonna butt heads, aren't we?
Listen, I lived in fear writing this book of like the college radio dude who's like 5 years older than me, so who graduated college in like 1994. Ooh. Like I lived in fear of that guy. He was like my inner critic, right? This being like, you didn't mention.
You didn't mention postpartum baseball. Fucking how could you not mention them, man?
That, and I was gonna kill a lot of darlings. Like, you are not as alt as you thought you were, man. Like
that, in writing this thing about hair metal, people get mad when you say it really wasn't a thing. It's just an extension of classic rock. There's really no difference, and by 84, 85, it's just pop music. People get mad at you. They're like, what do you mean? It was, sorry. Did you listen to Motley Crue's third record? What is metal about smoking in the boys' room? Right.
And I mean, because also within metal, this is a very niche. I have to shout out somebody here. So the university that I'm at is Fitchburg State. So north central Massachusetts, north of Worcester, deindustrialization alley. And in the late 80s, there was this amazing radio show run by these two DJs, Mark and Mike. They were the Big O Thrash Show. And they were like going out. I have all of these promos that they recorded outside of these like metal shows, like in downtown Fitchburg. Imagine what this is like in downtown Fitchburg, Massachusetts in like 1990. And going out, and they would like stick a microphone in the face of the metal performer, be like, can you do a promo for our radio show? Like, hey. And they had this metal show that was like so huge. Like they were really promoting. It was doing the indie thing
Mhm.
for metal. Like that's what metal was, and they had like Typo Negative and Wargasms, my favorite metal band name ever. They've got Lemmy on doing a promo, and he's like, Fitchburg, wonder what the streets are called there. And then and you then at the end you can hear him take a drink, and you can hear the ice clink in his glass. It's like a work of art. But like there's this whole underground metal thing, and that is also, again, going back to the class thing. These are a lot of like working class kids. Their dads worked in factories. The factory has now shut down, and they are pissed about it.
Mhm.
And like they don't have a place to go. And so like it was sort of channeling like this real kind of socioeconomic reality. Remember the whole like teen suicide crisis
Don't
of,
do it.
yeah. And like it was real. Like
Yeah.
it was a social crisis. And that, so like, yeah, you've got this sort of like glitzy, like escapist. I mean, it's just revisiting all of these like cultural categories that we have in times of economic crisis, right? If you look at the 1930s, you've got your escapist films and your like gritty realism.
Wizard of Oz, right?
Yeah, Wizard of Oz versus like Public Enemy, the Public Enemy, or the gangster movies, like the Al Capone ones, and that it's like these two, you need, and you need to have both in these moments, right? Everybody needs some like pop glitz. I have, at the time I can remember, I thought when grunge came out, I was like, oh, this is actually cool. All the other stuff is lame. But now I go back and I'm like, you know what? Sebastian Bach was a beautiful human being.
Sebastian Bach, the second Skid Row. I want to say this just in case Sebastian Bach is listening. Second Skid Row record, Heavy as Fuck, was a great record. Shout out to.
He's amazing. I remember the VH1 Behind the Music on Skid Row. And like his parents were like hippies, and like he grew up on an island in the Caribbean because they like dropped out of society or something. Like he's got authentic like cred.
And he's been doing it since like the mid 80s. He was in a band called Madam X beforehand with, and I didn't know this for the longest time, the Petrucci's. I didn't know that was a whole family of fucking ridiculous musical prodigies. But there's something about I wanted before we go back to Lollapalooza, I want to ask you one more question about the late 90s as we're dispelling myths. Maybe I should have called this show Jason and Catherine Shit on Your Childhood.
Sorry,
as we shit on our own. There's this thing about Napster and music becoming free, and I don't buy that the very linear story of someone stealing CDs and uploading it. There's uploading people into there's a 2-part documentary about it. I don't know if you watched it, called How Music Became Free. It's based off a book, I think, of the same title.
Yeah, I have the book. I didn't see the movie.
I think it's an important story. I think it's part of the story, but I think you hit on another major factor of why music becomes free, and it is because of the exorbitant price of CDs.
Yeah.
Because Napster, and even if you read the book or watch the movie, the stuff that's being leaked that people are running to get is not, banned. They're not trying to get postpartum baseball.
No.
They're trying to get major label releases early.
Yeah. I think the first MP3 I downloaded was Cyndi Lauper.
There you go. Right.
And I was a college DJ, right? Napster came out when I was in college. And so I watched people, because we had the Ethernet connection. So we had high-speed internet. And I remember watching, I think it was actually a professor, just sitting in his office, just filling up hard drives with like everything he could download. And because the moral compact had already been broken by the corporate music industry, that they were gouging. And and some of that goes back to the debut of the CD, which so late 70s, there's an economic recession. It hits the music industry too, mostly also because in the 70s they'd relied on the superstars model of we're going to fill up a Kiss arena, and we're not going to like sort of fund our pipeline of smaller artists and smaller venues, that they had kind of oversaturated at the high end. And then the economy goes to hell, and people stop buying music, this is when they also start disinvesting from promotion on college radio. They actually cut a lot of the college radio promotions in the early 80s, start doing record service fees like IRS was doing. But then 83, the CD takes off and they're like, woo, like, let's, we're back in the game. Like, we're going to have like, and they fill their coffers right back up. And by the 90s, right, it is sort of amazing. Like right now, like the thought of buying something for $20, $25, $27, they sometimes where I'm like,
it's insane.
I have a job now, but that's like a lot of money. And, to be a teenager. So they had already like broken the trust of the consumer, that everybody knew that we were being ripped off for, 15 years, and that, but we didn't have any really other choice unless you were like sat next to your radio and like recorded your mixtape off of the radio, and that you would get like some, jack off DJ like shouting into your song. Like, how many of us had mixtapes that were like
DJs talking commercials, a lot of commercials on your, yeah. And there's only so many songs. There's only so many songs that you were going to get. You were only going to get the singles. Even if you're listening to college radio, like you said, it's like we're track 2 of the Styx record. So there's not a lot of stuff you're going to get if you're trying to get it through any other means other than you have a weird friend that is buying everything because they have some insane amount of money, or you have enough different friends that you can go around and be like, oh, you have the first Tribe record, can I get a copy of your CD? Like, that's the only way you're going to get a pretty healthy collection of music. Or you go down to the spot in your hood where there's the cat selling all the bootleg stuff. But even the bootleg stuff, because this is all about markets, is never going to be Postpartum Baseball.
Right.
This is why I hate these guys that do these video essays like, but all punk music came from black people. I was like, that's not true. Sorry. There's black people that did it, but they weren't as influential as you want them to be. Like the whole death documentary, I watched it and I wanted to like it. Why would I not want to like it? Right. But I watched it. I was like, really? You guys putting 20 on a 10 on this one? Because I never met anyone that was like, man, I picked up the guitar after I heard this fucking 15th generation copy of this band. No, you didn't. You picked it up because you fucking heard, Black Flag or some shit like that. And they didn't hear these motherfuckers either. So this whole story is.
But I think we also forget that there was this moment when the internet, the quote unquote digital disruption happened. See, I don't like that term either, because the corporate music industry was going to find a way to screw people over. That's continuous, right? Yes. Book publishing is doing the same thing. They don't give a crap about authors or musicians when they're thinking about their business models. So they were going to find a way to make this work for them. There is no disruption. It's just like it's a business cycle for them. For the artists, right, it's always difficult. And you've got to then navigate all of these changes. And I think people forget that there was this moment, though, like 2001, 2002, 2003, where, like Matador, some of the big indies, Chuck D was very outspoken on this, of trying to figure out a way to incorporate the digital music way of distribution into a model for music production that was going to still, not starve artists. Would it have worked? I have no idea. Probably not. But there were at least alternatives that were circulating, different ways of doing business. It didn't have to be this way. And so those kind of moments of contingency are important, especially when you have continued change and continued ripping off of artists and writers.
So do you think that, I think it's the 96 year where they have Metallica play, which is this big, Travis, they bill it as this was the moment where people were pissed off at the festival. I don't think anyone is mad at a music festival for a headliner. as a person that maybe audiences have changed over the last 30 years, but as someone that's worked in music festivals, I was at Coachella the year Beyonce canceled.
Mm.
And no one said, fuck this, and went home. It's a party, and everybody wanted to go to the party because you want to get really high, you want to get really laid, and you want to say you were there. More than anything,
Mm-hmm.
you just want to say you were there. And that's way bigger than this idea that people are going to get so mad. They're like, I'm not going to go because Metallica's headlining. Well, so who gives a shit if 100 of the other bands that you give a damn about are there? Just leave.
Right.
I went to Lollapalooza one time in 2003, and I can't remember who I was there to see. It was my friend bought me a ticket. It was Incubus. That's how fucking, this wants you to know what kind of man I am. I can't deny Brandon Boyd's fucking
Really good.
He's just an attractive man. Sings real well.
Was he wearing a red cod piece though?
No, this was still kind of baggy pants era, right? He didn't have a shirt on though, motherfucker. But I saw Audio Slave play.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I didn't give a shit about that band. I didn't hate them. I just didn't care. I've said this before on the show, they did a cover of Seven Nation Army. The most amazing version I've ever. I won't even listen to the White Stripes version. And then they ended with their single, which was a Cochise, I think, at the time.
Uh-huh.
Blew the fucking roof off a roofless amphitheater. And then Jane's Addiction came on after that. And I actually liked Jane's Addiction. I was like, I'm sorry, Perry. Sorry, brother. You don't follow that. You don't follow. And I left. I didn't feel at all like money was wasted. To this day, my buddy that bought the ticket, we still talk about how much fun we had there. So I don't believe this idea that, oh, Metallica was there, we just couldn't go. That's really why you couldn't go.
I mean, yeah, you get what if you get what you need out of the experience, like great. I think it's when it starts to become this litmus test of like how countercultural and pure were you? Like, did you like this band on the small stage?
And you know what you want to say? You motherfuckers didn't. Because when they gave you what allegedly you wanted, y'all were like, why the fuck do I want to go see Postpartum Baseball?
Yes.
I don't give a fuck about a slow dive, a high dive. Don't care.
No, the people want what the people want. And it's the tensions come in when you are then trying to pretend like, no, I don't listen to Cyndi Lauper. I only listen to the B-sides of L7. Like,
maybe PJ Harvey.
Right. But like she was on MTV too much.
So do you think that's bullshit then?
Yes.
Why are the sales down in 96 in your opinion?
Well, there wasn't as much good stuff.
Is this the fallout from Cobain? Is there a Cobain fallout in your opinion with that?
We can't blame that poor man for.
You gotta look, if he's gonna be fucking Gen X Jesus, we gotta this was the dark times.
I mean, I'm looking. All right, so I'm going back to the primary sources of like, what did the person looking to see MJ want out of Lollapalooza in the summer of 1995? Let's see. There, it's summer. What do people want in the summer? What summer means to us is the time when lucky music fans get to stand outside for 10 hours praying for either rain or sunshine, depending on what it's not doing, paying double-digit sums for a light snack, darting back and forth between stages and catching bands we'll be bragging about having seen years from now. Admit it, you love Lollapalooza. And with this year's killer lineup, we love Lollapalooza all over again too. This is year 4.
Mm-hmm.
maybe 5, 4. Yeah, this is year 4.
Or, yeah.
And they're already like, everything's too expensive. And we know that this kind of sucks, like as a physical experience. But like, Lord, will you go back to college and have some cred with your friends when you get there? And then 2 pages later is an advertisement for Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill.
Damn. That's damn. You're I don't know if we've crushed all the dreams so far today.
Sorry.
But no, dude, watching that doc, and I know you'll watch it at some point. Watching it was interesting, but I'm also watching it and I'm taking notes at the same time. And then I looked for your email. Where is this woman's email? Because I was like, I think we could talk about this, because I'm watching it. I'm like, I think you guys are trying to make it out to be that this thing was a lot bigger than it was. It's a lot more authentic than it was. And someone in the chat is asking a question that I'm working on. I'm working on another piece about authenticity and selling out. And it's something that's been troubling me because, again, as I said earlier with hip hop, it's at this moment with hip hop where no one really cares about, you just literally can make up a story, and people are fine with the made up story that you purport to be your life, which to me was kind of like where rock has always been, right? You know, Shout at the Devil comes out, and it's filled with satanic imagery. And the band is saying in interviews that you can watch on the YouTube, no, it's shout at the devil, not with the devil. We're not Satanists. And a lot of those bands would push back against the Satanism claim because they wanted to get in all the record stores. They didn't want that albatross around their neck of being, at the time, kid diddlers, kid murderers, and Satanists, but they loved the fact that it stirred up the suburbanite moms.
Yeah. Being on the Filthy 15 was great business.
Oh, those parental warning stickers let you know this. I got
this one.
And if you had it in school, that was a cool kid thing. Like you pull out, like, I got the real NWA. Oh, shit.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an interesting difference between, you know, sort of the authenticity politics in hip hop are very different than the ones in indie rock, because I think, you know, like, so I teach a class on hip hop history, and, you know, I connect it to the, you know, like African American verbal arts traditions, right? And boasting and toasting, like those that like people understand when you're in the cipher, when you're in the frame, you understand that this is not real. Like, your mama's so fat jokes are like have to happen within a ritual frame. My students love it when I try to imitate this. I have a whole spiel I do on like, why is this white lady from Vermont teaching me about hip hop? Which needs to be said like from the get-go, because they're like,
I need to be a fly on your wall, please, ma'am. I have to hear the your mama jokes into hip hop battling.
It's so bad. I like read them off of paper because I forget. Like, they're not, let's just say they're not internalized. But I'm very like upfront about it. Like, I am going to look like an asshole right now. So like they like, just so that you know. But like, so like that, like the expression and the authenticity, it's all happening like within very different commercial setup and very different like cultural references, frameworks than from like white indie rock. But at the same time, like that language is very much pervading the mid 1990s for both, you know, because gangster rap has become hip hop. It has become corporate hip hop. It has become pop at this point. You know, and it you know, remains so, really. And so it's those kinds of cultural politics that are taking place with then sort of like the culture wars scrutiny. But then, you know, so we had the lineup, we have the what do you want out of your summer? You want your cred. You have Alanis Morissette. You know what the next artist advertised in the CMJ for summer of 1995 is?
95. Wait, I want to guess.
Okay. They have a new album.
Female or male?
Male.
It's not Michael Jackson.
CMJ.
It's going to be a male solo artist.
Nope.
It's a group.
It's a group.
95. Smashing Pumpkins.
Nope. It's the Circle Jerks.
Really?
But here's the tagline. It says, "Real punk rock returns on a brand new album from the legendary Circle Jerks. Quote, oddities, abnormalities, and curiosities includes Teenage Electric and I Want to Destroy You." So here you have Lollapalooza, come get your cred, kids, Alanis Morissette, and then the Circle Jerks right now to be like, here's where the real punk is, in the same issue, right? So there's no it's all contested, right? That the artists and the labels are all trying to claim this ground. They all they're all selling themselves as the most authentic. But, they're all doing it in advertisement pages and through major labels. So I'm going to look at, if I'm putting Alanis Morissette, Jagged Little Pill next to Circle Jerks, and which is the more authentic voice here? Whose authenticity, right?
Well, Kate, in the great words of the poet laureate Alanis Morissette, it's not fair. To remind me of the mess you made when you brought this shit up. So again, this is reminding me of this thing that I'm writing that I have to finish by today. That would have been finished had we not done this show today. So this is why I keep bringing this up, because I have to write the conclusion.
Think it through out loud.
This is another reason why you have professors that are established authors on your show, so you can work through your ideas. There you go.
That's what we're here for. My entire job.
Have friends in all the right places. Heavy metal is growing organically overseas in the early 80s, and it is kind of this pushback against quote unquote, we'll say corporate rock, the large rock of the day. The UK has their bands as well that are these large Genesis, right? So there's the industry wants to again sand off the rough edges of heavy metal, and that's kind of where you get pop, glam, hair, whatever you want to call it. But then there's these things that happen in the underground at the same time that are truly organic, that are growing. Thrash metal is one of them, and then all the other offshoots. And by the 90s, we get into that kind of the hyper classification of everything. And the same feels like for this music, because we go from alternative to grunge, and it has to be a certain thing. Anyone from Seattle is grunge. They ditch the alternative label real quick, because grunge is where the record sales are at. And then people move to Seattle, which is, right? It's a weird thing to say out loud, because Seattle is in the corner of the United States of America. The next major metropolitan city east of it is Minnesota. So you're kind of on an island in this place where the industry was probably for 5 minutes. It really was there and gone. There is no industry.
And then it's looking for the next. For a while, they thought it was Charlottesville. For a while, they thought it was going to be Chapel Hill. They were like, where's the next one?
And where was it? I don't know. I think the internet made it easier to find people. It's like, well, that guy's popular. And that's the way the model is still to this day. So like a friend of mine we were talking about rap, and people always talk about kind of the degradation of hip hop now. And he goes, well, there's no big rappers coming from major metropolitan areas. There's big rappers that are from those areas, but they've been around for a while. If you think about a lot of these newer people, especially the females, they come from the South, where there's still real poverty there.
Yeah. like Rhapsody's probably one of the more authentic voice right?
Doechii is from Florida, I believe.
Yeah. By the way, the best person to read on this scene is Regina Bradley, who she wrote a book about Outkast.
Oh wow!
Called Chronicling Stankonia, and she writes about the Dirty South and the rise of Southern hip hop. She's amazing.
Ooh, that actually sounds really interesting.
She's awesome.
So it feels like all this stuff, like pop metal peters out. It's got like a 3-year lifespan, really. It's pretty much like 83 to 87. And then the next people you get that you're later going to call that post facto, like Guns N' Roses, for example, Skid Row, for example. These guys are so far from makeup and glam and glitz, right? Skid Row is kind of a metal band, and Guns N' Roses is just a heavier version of Rolling Stones.
Right. Except, I mean, but you have guys like, what's his face? I could picture him on my Instagram, the bass player.
For Guns N' Roses?
Yeah.
Duff McKagan?
Duff McKagan, thank you. Right, he comes out of the New York punk scene. He's in a band called The Farts. With a Z on the end.
That's usually reserved for black people. So we know they're black. Boys.
But they were like hanging out with the Beastie Boys. Like they're part of that like New York crossover indie rock hip hop scene of the early 80s. And we're getting play on college radio. So like they have like some you can always see him. He always in the videos, the Guns N' Roses videos had the CBGB shirt on.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, and the TSOL. Yeah, they were really.
They had multiple influences. They
that's
multitudes.
This scene only lasts a little bit, and I think the same could be said for this. So I agree with you that Lollapalooza kind of plays itself out because, again, this way we're trying to market this music, it's just played out by 94 maybe, and it doesn't matter who you bring in at that point. And Metallica ain't cheap.
Right.
There's a festival in Vegas that recently said they were going to have Metallica there called Sick World or something like that. I forget what it was called. And they ended up canceling. They're supposed to have Metallica and what's that band that I hate that everybody likes? Their singer was really good, and this poor guy committed suicide. Linkin Park.
Oh yeah, yeah. They're terrible. They're great for weightlifting, but
crawling in my skin.
One more, Kate. One more.
I mean, we feel like you're gonna shart, like it's good to have like that, like you're pumping iron.
Now, when you see Kate at the Planet Fitness, you know what's in those earbuds.
They tell you not to grunt there, so
Oh, so you don't go there because you're like, no, I'm serious about my shit. Fucking deadlifting, 500 pounds over here. I can't have you fucking with me. Dropping this weight. But were you an athlete? Did we mention this before? You were an athlete.
I played rugby in college.
Oh, you're a serious athlete.
Except it was like club rugby. So, we'd like drive there in our cars, get our asses kicked, and then drive home.
So you weren't on the squat rack trying to do break personal records?
No.
Now you are.
Yes, now. Serious. No.
Some damn kids.
I'm trying.
But before we go, I want to ask you this. Does Lollapalooza lay the foundation for Coachella?
Yeah, because it's a brand. It's an image. Ooh. It becomes something that is clearly like bankable, where it can get the sponsorships. It can get, it's a business model that's going to work elsewhere. We have Boston Calling here in Boston. It's successful. It's good. They got a good lineups. Does that mean it's a sellout? I don't know. That's how I end everything. I don't know.
I'm with you. I don't know. I know that, again, like I said, the one I went to, who was there that I saw that I'd never seen the Donnas before.
Oh, I love the Donnas so much.
And
so much.
Definitely. Yeah. That I've had some crushes on some of those women in the Donnas. They played First to Nobody. Is play first at a festival. I don't give a fuck what festival you're at. Ain't nobody there.
Yeah, no.
Go back and watch Jimi Hendrix playing Woodstock. Wasn't nobody there to hear that shit. Anyone that says they were there was lying out of their ass. I remember when Jimi Hendrix. No, you didn't. Fucking left right after fucking Crosby, Stills, and Nash or some shit. Shut up. I need to see. I saw Santana. That's enough. So that's the truth. But I 30 what's Jared Leto's band? 30 Seconds to Mars.
Was that his? Yeah. I can't.
30 seconds. Before they started trying to sound like My Chemical Romance, we saw that on the second stage. It was kind of fun. It was kind of a fun time to just kind of walk around and hear and see some new interesting stuff. Like I said, that to this day,
he's an important figure. Have I told you what my crazy trade book idea is? What I'm totally gonna write? It's for an audience of a small audience. It's called Xenial, a macro history of a micro generation.
And it's just about your love affair with Jared Leto and my so-called life.
Well, because it's also known as Generation Catalano. This is the Carter babies, basically. We're the in between Gen X and the millennials.
I don't know, man. Can we just be Gen X? Because I'm 77, and are you 80?
79.
79.
Yeah.
Can we?
I know we are Gen X, but we can exist in a digital world in a way.
Yeah, we can.
And also, if you think about it, looking who we looked up to, they got to have the formative experiences, and then everything went to shit for us. So I graduated college in 2001. It's like I step out into oh God, the world is terrifying. And then so our entire adulthood. So we didn't have those when Lollapalooza was just an innocent romp in the park.
No, we really. I can't think there was no big festivals, and Lollapalooza was never that big.
Yeah,
Woodstock 94 and 99 was massive,
huge, and I remember the 99 one being very glad I didn't go.
Jesus, yeah. There's 300,000 people at that thing.
Yeah, and then they were just like Woodstock 1.0, sliding in mud that is filled with feces.
Yeah, it's every Woodstock, everyone has been a disaster. And if you think 69 fucking worked out, I got a bridge to sell you, because that shit sucked. There was one porta potty.
Yeah, no, it was disgusting.
Porta potty. Think about that for a second. Just marinate on that for a minute. And you see Wavy Gravy and handing out granola for 3. Would you want a cup of granola? Day 2? Fuck that noise. You're gonna eat your friends. You're gonna eat your friends.
You're stuck there, and then you're gonna roll around in their poop.
People came back with so much, the state had to come in and save them. No one realizes that the first one was 94, equally as bad. 99, it's the young people. Sure, that's who did it. Go fuck yourself. There was sexual assaults in 68.
Yes, there were. A friend of mine went to the original 1.0, and she's like, "Oh yeah, no, multiple rapes."
Oh yeah, the pill comes out right before that, and as one feminist author, I can't remember her name, wrote, there was an implied yes on the part of many men if they asked you if you took the pill.
Ugh.
So let's, these things failed horribly, and they were able to do them multiple times and make it the model. The name itself still, to a lot of people, means peace, harmony. We're there for the music, man.
And imagine society free of commercialism and materialism, and we're going to remake the world. Were you? Or were you just going to go and like build finance capitalism after?
That's what they wanted. Do you know who financed the first Woodstock? It is future venture capitalists, because one hippie dude who becomes a future venture capitalist wanted to build a recording studio in Woodstock, New York, so him and his friends could get high out of their minds and make music. That is the story. If you don't believe me, they said it, not me. I'm not paraphrasing. That's what they said.
Yeah.
Didn't work out. They lost money, but they recorded it. You know, the foresight of these motherfuckers to see the future of live streaming. They recorded it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where they made their money back, in the recording of it and the marketing of the name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's all brand. I mean, and that is the mode of capitalism. We don't make stuff anymore. We just brand things.
Ooh. Once again,
we coming for you, nigga.
Catherine, Rye, Jewel. So is it just local festivals then? Just go to local music fests?
No, go to the festivals. Everybody should go to the festivals. Go to Coachella.
Don't go to Coachella.
Yeah, maybe not Coachella. Like, you know, go to Boston Calling. Go to the festivals. Have a good time. Stop apologizing for paying for the only ways where our money can get to an artist. This is how artists have to make a living now, is by performing and selling merchandise. When you go to a show, buy the t-shirt, buy the album, buy the little poster, because that's all they got. Like, artists got to make a living somehow.
It's true. That's all they have. As a person that did that for a living for a long time, that's all we had.
Buy the t-shirt.
Buy the t-shirt.
And if people think you're cool because you have it, awesome.
Smaller the band, the cooler you are, because no one's gonna be like, oh, where'd you get that fucking
what do you think?
Dreamcatcher Arachnophobia t-shirt?
I mean, I am looking at the names from 1995.
And am I that far?
Remember the Chubbies?
No. Were they a ska band?
They had an album called I'm the King. The Chubbies aren't chubby. They aren't even plural. The Chubbies are a one-woman band by the name of Jeanette, who plays all the instruments on this debut record, sings all the multi-track vocals. She's got great hiccupy 80s pop voice, wrote all the songs. She picked up her sonic aesthetic from the Ramones' Buzzsaw. Sounds great. I would buy that album. And Ani DeFranco, Not a Pretty Girl, came out. I mean, they're Irresistible Force and Isaac Hayes. They covered it all. They covered CMJ, they did not discriminate.
So it's like White Town. It's not even a town. It's just one dude. I guess. Look, like what you like.
Like what you like.
Listen to what you want to listen to.
Even if you don't like it, they still deserve to get paid. Putting their stuff out there.
Stream it, whatever, dude. Most of the bands that you hear were never going to get on radio anyways.
It's true.
I get excited whenever there's a deposit in my account for $20 because people stream the intro of this show.
Go.
I get so excited.
Money's money. We don't have like our patrons, patron lord in 17th century France to like support our piano pickings, right? It's the VC guys are not going to come and like fund the artists to just go create something that pleases me. People got to make a living somehow, and all of our stuff is being ripped off anyways. My books are being used to train Meta's AI apparently.
Oh, that's fucked up.
But oh yeah, they're using pirated books, and they know that they're pirated. They just couldn't afford to buy the books, so they're going to go to the pirate site to train their AI. I mean, everything is terrible. Do you want to hear the top 25 hip hop though? Summer 1995.
Can I guess?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see if you can get some from the top.
Okay. Wu-Tang.
Let's see. We got Old Dirty Bastard.
So that's ODB, Grand Puba,
Method Man.
Method Man. 95.
Yeah.
Common Sense.
Common Sense. Resurrection. Number 3. Older to Bastards. Number 2.
Skilo. I wish I was a little bit taller. I wish I was a baller. Wish I was a.
He's does not appear to be on the CMJ list.
No shit. Far Side. Lab Cabin, California.
Ooh.
Souls of Mischief, No Man's Land.
No. We got Channel Live.
Madism.
The Friday soundtrack.
Ooh, the Friday soundtrack. Okay. I forgot all about Fridays.
Red Man. Soundtrack to Bad Boys.
Who in the Bad Boys?
The soundtrack to Bad Boys.
Oh, the soundtrack to Bad Boys.
Diggable Planets.
Ah, the second record, Blowout Comb.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's a great record.
Lords of the Underground. Dream Warriors. E40.
Really? E40 and no Skilo?
Yeah.
What the fuck's going on, CMJ?
Adina Howard's number 25, but number 1, we have not mentioned who number 1 is.
In 95. We didn't say number 1?
No, we have not said
number 1. Mobb Deep.
Nope.
Is Mobb Deep not on the list?
Nope. This is July 95.
Huh. I swear that was 95 when that came out.
The Roots.
Do You Want More?
Yep.
I thought that was 94. Is that 95?
Are we 94? No, this is 95.
Do
July
You Want
95.
More?
But maybe it's just still chopping.
Is that the one with Erykah Badu on it? If you were worried about when, what would maybe, or no, that's the one with what they do, what they do, what they do. That's on that record, right?
I was still in Vermont at this point.
Okay, sorry.
We did not have hip-hop radio. We did not have Black people either. So.
No, you do not.
There were 2 Black students at my high school.
I believe it. And they probably both were frightened.
Yeah, they should have been.
Because that. Oh, what is it? Nectar's. The place in Vermont is Nectar's.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I never lived in Burlington. I'm from like the opposite corner from Burlington.
There was a place we played and it had monkey in the name. I don't remember.
That tracks.
But yeah, now I remember Nectar's has a Metal Monday, and I think Nectar's still exists, and I think they still run it. So if you live in Burlington, go support Metal Monday night. That's a rad thing for one cat to keep going for like 20 years.
That's amazing. And Vermont still has an independently owned modern alternative radio station. It's WUX out of Manchester.
That's awesome.
Actually independent owned commercial FM radio.
Oh, it must be so wonderful to drive through that, 47 square miles. The signal is.
It's like in a mountain, so like you go over the mountain and then you lose it. But like late at night, sometimes I could still get it. You could get it in the Capital District area, like in Albany, but then on the other side of the Green Mountains, you could not really pick it up for this mountainy. By the way, Soul Asylum is the last advertisement in this issue of CMJ.
That is a band that I couldn't tell you one of their songs, but I know they exist.
Is that Runaway Train? Runaway Train.
That's Soul Asylum?
I think is that Soul Asylum? I like hallucinating. My dog's like, "Are you singing?"
That was. Remember when everybody? So back to the whole capitalist reproduction. There's this moment where all these bands to me look like they're trying to look like the grunge scene, but they sound like pop bullshit. And Soul Asylum what's another one from Savage?
Dave Pirner, they had cred.
Sure.
So they had underground cred. What was the one that didn't? I'm trying to think of. I mean, but Dave Pirner is pretty. He dated Winona Ryder? Isn't she like in that video?
What?
All of my like MTV references kind of collapse into one.
Somebody just said the same thing, didn't
see? See? She was like and then he's in the background at the end of Reality Bites. He has like a little cameo. He's like playing a guitar like in the background.
No.
Yeah.
I get Reality Bites and Singles so confused.
I was all Reality Bites. I love a good.
That's Winona Ryder and Janine Garofalo, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hootie and the Blowfish is 95.
Yes, which I own that on cassette.
Damn, that's hardcore because couldn't do it. Do you know what it's like being a black guy that plays guitar? You know how many times I've been called Hootie? Well, I play something a little heavier. Whatever, Hootie. Just make with the music.
Be happy. Do your thing. Follow your muse.
What's the other band that I don't like? If you want to be my baby.
Oh, the Spin Doctors.
Yeah,
they were broken by WEQX in Vermont. I'm talking to the DJ who did that.
Are they from the East Coast?
No, he just picked up on it. But like, I actually I have like a very brief moment in the book when I talk about this because like modern rock alternatives, the X station start to become another engine of this. So these are, the Lollapalooza, they're on modern rock alternative FM, not really college radio so much by this point. And but they're around, but like the breathlessness, they're like, this is the new Beatles, like as they like go huge. Not the WEQX DJs, but the press as they're like going big because they felt very like, oh, this is true.
I want to ask you this question before we leave. The Beatles only last, what, 8 years?
Yeah, like 62. Yeah, something like that. 8, 6, 8.
Led Zeppelin, about the same amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we think bands have to last forever?
Because we love our pantheon. That we want to have. I mean, and some of that, that is some of what the work of Lollapalooza is doing, is it's like that kind of rockist mentality of like, these are the bands you must know to have credibility as a music fan. And so, yeah, we want them to go on so that we can continue to participate and demonstrate our rockist credibility.
Rockist. I love it. Thank you. I'm asking that question to myself. I don't know the answer, and I think you gave me. I have to give you a shout out on the when it's all said and done. I have to
That's good.
put a footnote.
I earned my footnotes.
Dictated by Katherine Rigel. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I really appreciate you spending the time and working with me so we can get this thing done.
I'm glad it worked out. This is great.
This is a lot of fun for me. If you guys want to take a trip down memory lane, there's 2 things you can do. Number 1, you can buy Katherine's book, and it's called
Live from the Underground.
Live from the Underground.
History of College Radio.
It's on an academic press. If I'm not mistaken.
It's UNC Press.
Okay. Go back a few months, and she was on the show with me, Conan. I think it was just me, you, and Conan. I don't remember, but
yeah, I think so. There were only 3 of us,
and your name has definitely come up as we are talking about the year of 1995 in music. And so Conan and I are spinning this thing off into so many different shows. We both graduated high school in 95, so I am going to my 30-year reunion.
Oh, that's right. My husband also graduated. No, he graduated in 96, but he's born in 77. So,
well, our reunion, because I went to a small school, is the class of 96, the class of 95 as well. So it's went to a small school. It's gonna be a big party. It's gonna be fun. But because of that, we did a show the other day about just alternative from 95. So you should come on and we should talk about the pop music of 95.
Oh boy. I was very much a high school listener.
Selena dies. It's been 30 years since Selena was taken away from us, which is a true tragedy because that woman had an amazing voice. But check out Katherine's book. And after you check out Katherine's book, while it's on the way to getting to you, because you're probably going to order it on some book ordering site, watch the documentary. Is it called Lala? It's called Lala, right?
Lala, yeah.
And then say something in the comments about why you hated it. Because it ends on the most like, get the fuck out of here note where they just, and then it went to Chicago and that's when we broke Lady Gaga. Like, no, you didn't. Not at all. You didn't break anybody. No one broke anything. Sorry. Stop lying.
It was not you.
So thank you very much, Catherine.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your day.
You too.
That was Catherine Rigel. She's great. I'm glad she is in the TIR universe of people we can call on to have these kind of discussions, because sometimes Conan and I need firm academic foundation, so it's not just two angry musicians yelling at each other. We don't necessarily yell at each other because we want to talk about music in a positive light. But, you know, again, maybe I should change the title to Jason and Catherine Shit on Your Gen X Fantasies of Authenticity and Coolness, because that's really what this was. And I loved it. And I appreciate her for every minute. I will be back Tuesday talking about something a little more serious. Be talking immigration. So I'll see you guys then. I am out.